I've wanted to make a video about this volleyball player for ages, but for some reason I just never got around to it. Time to fix that mistake. Today, in your favorite segment, Play Like a Pro, we're talking about the legendary Russian volleyball player Dmitriy Muserskiy. As always, we've got the most interesting facts about his life, plus a breakdown of his techniques and playing style. He's one of the tallest players in the world, so there's plenty to cover. Alright, no more delays, let's dive right in. Dmitriy Muserskiy was born on October 29, 1988 in Makeyevka, Donetsk region. He grew up in a sporty family. For instance, his dad was a master swimmer at the international level. Dmitry definitely got his height from him, though he even surpassed his father in that department. By the time he was 8, Dmitry was taller than all his peers, so the first thought for his sports future was basketball. But since little Dmitry didn't like running much, he couldn't see himself in that sport and decided to focus on volleyball instead. Fun fact, even at an early age, his first coach instilled in him the value of versatility. It's no surprise that Muserskiy excelled not just as a middle blocker, but also as an opposite hitter. But we'll get to that later. By the time he was 14, it was clear that volleyball was going to be a big part of Dmitry's life. He left his hometown and moved to Kharkiv to train and study at a specialized sports academy. There, the coaching staff of Ukraine's junior national team noticed him, and he competed in several international tournaments, including the European Championship in Kazan for youth teams. That same year, Dmitry decided to switch his sports citizenship from Ukrainian to Russian. At the time, he was already playing for Lokomotiv Belogorye too, invited by the legendary Russian coach Gennady Shipulin. This change caused some issues in the Champions League for Belogorye. In 2006, they beat Austria's Tyrol and France's Tours, but later received technical losses for both matches. Why? Because Dmitry was registered as a Russian player, but the European Volleyball Confederation still considered his sports citizenship Ukrainian. By then, Dmitry had submitted all the necessary documents and even received his Russian passport, but it wasn't enough to save Belogorye from sanctions. Honestly, I don't remember how that story ended, but I vividly recall the sense of disappointment it left me with. I even started to dislike Dmitry a little. I was just starting to follow volleyball and root for the Lions. I remember watching those matches where the new kid, Dmitriy Muserskiy, only came on to strengthen the serve. He didn't contribute much to the wins, but because of him, the team risked losing their spot in the next round. Of course, those feelings eventually faded. Dmitry spent a solid 13 years with Belogorye, winning all the domestic trophies, the Champions League and even the Club World Championship. Despite this long-standing relationship and his desire to finish his career in Belgorod, internal conflicts within the club led him to leave the Russian league and head to Japan. He explained that he enjoyed playing in tournaments in Japan and visiting the country as a tourist. This move became the perfect way for him to step away from the psychological pressure and try something new in a different league. Let's be honest, in Russia, both management and fans can be very demanding. After the triumph at the London Olympics in 2012, where Dmitry was hailed as a hero, just a few years later, he was being called a traitor. The reason? He declined to go to the Rio Olympics in 2016 and temporarily stepped away from the national team. Initially, it was due to family reasons, and later injuries came into play. But the public didn't take kindly to these decisions, and some even suggested treating players who refused to represent the national team as foreign players. However, Dmitry was always happy to play for the national team when he felt healthy and ready to contribute, rather than just taking up a spot on the roster. The brightest memory of Muserskiy in the Russian national team is undoubtedly the legendary 2012 Olympic final in London. Coming in as an opposite, he helped orchestrate an epic comeback. Still, Dmitry doesn't get why people celebrate the anniversary of that match every year. He admits it was the highlight of his international career, with the whole world watching. But in his opinion, the quality of play in that final wasn't great. Dmitry probably wanted to compete in Tokyo, but the doping scandal robbed him of that chance. He was suspended for 9 months after a trace amount of geranium extract was found in a 2013 doping sample. This bizarre ruling cost him not only the Olympics, where Russia finished second, but also a significant chunk of the Japanese league season. Let's talk about the Japanese chapter of Dmitry Muserskiy's career, which marked a major turning point for the legendary Russian volleyball player. After spending 13 years at Belgorod's Belogori, Dmitry bought out his contract in 2018 and joined Japan's Suntory Sunbirds. He had plenty of options for his next move, but as I mentioned earlier, Muserskiy admired Japan and saw this as the most comfortable choice, not just for volleyball, but for life in general. However, Dmitry doesn't plan to stay in Japan forever. He's mentioned that he misses Russia and intends to return once his contract with the Sunbirds ends. It's unclear when exactly that will happen, but it could be as soon as the end of this or the next season. What surprised me was seeing Muserskiy become more active on social media, especially on TikTok, and even launching training courses for volleyball players. It seems that moving to a new country gave him a fresh perspective, inspiring him to connect more with fans despite never being particularly media-oriented. Unfortunately, Dmitry has since stopped his social media activities and even deleted all his posts. I'm sure there are people who don't follow Muserskiy's career in Japan and know him only as a middle blocker. Then there's another group that knows him solely as the Sunbirds' opposite hitter and might not even realize he played other positions. So let's cover both stages of his career. Back when Muserskiy was working on his volleyball courses, he often claimed that height doesn't matter in volleyball. But let's be honest, Dmitry isn't the best person to make that argument. His 218 cm height is a massive advantage, and his example proves it. Thanks to his physicality and exceptional volleyball IQ, stopping Muserskiy on the court was nearly impossible. If he hit at his peak height, he was untouchable. The only thing that could stop him was a poor set, not the opposing block. And despite all this, he had an extensive arsenal of attacking options, again thanks to the fact that from a height of 218 cm he could easily see the court, and there was no need for excessive effort to send the ball over to the opponent's side. So, stopping this machine was simply impossible. Dmitry didn't rely on smashing balls with raw power. He preferred to play smart, taking the ball at the highest possible point and aiming carefully around the block instead of trying to break the floor. That's what made him unique. A middle blocker who could legitimately contend for the title of the best volleyball player in the world. Middle blockers rarely take center stage, but Muserskiy was a leader both for his club and the national team. With all due respect to Simon, widely considered the best middle blocker globally, the Cuban star is usually in discussions about his position, not as the outright best player. Dmitry, however, transcended positional boundaries. That's my personal opinion, of course. Feel free to share yours in the comments. It's tough to predict Muserskiy's style of play since it heavily depends on the setter. He's equally effective near the setter or attacking closer to zone 4, but his preferred attacks often target zones 4 or 5. While he has a wide offensive arsenal, this direction has always caused opponents the most trouble. Some middle blockers stand out for specific strengths, but Dmitry was dominant in both attack and blocking. His height played a huge role here, allowing him to wait longer before jumping and carefully read the hitter's intentions in zones 3 and 6. Catching him off guard was almost impossible. You'd think life might be easier for outside hitters, but not when Muserskiy was on the net. Back then, volleyball wasn't as fast-paced as it is today, except maybe for the French teams, who brought a more dynamic game. Even if Muserskiy didn't fully align with the outside blocker, he could simply extend his arms and close off space. He was like a perfect machine built for results. Honestly, just imagining a block with both Muserskiy and Sapochkov on the same line gives me chills. What a wall that would be. Since 2018, Dmitry has played in Japan as an opposite hitter, Many newer volleyball fans don't even know about his days as a middle blocker. After all, his iconic performance in the London Olympics final happened when he was playing as an opposite. Personally, I was curious about how Muserskiy would perform outside the Japanese league. The Tokyo Olympics could have been an ideal platform for him, given his ability to cover both middle blocker and opposite roles in a limited roster. Unfortunately, as mentioned earlier, he missed that chance. Still, Muserskiy proved his worth at the 2023 Club World Championship, where he scored a staggering 53 points in just 2 playoff matches with impressive efficiency, helping the Sunbirds secure bronze medals. Even with opponents specifically targeting him in their blocking and defensive strategies, Dmitriy stood out as the team's undeniable leader. This episode of Play Like a Pro isn't about breaking down specific technical details. While Muserskiy's attacking fundamentals are top tier, what truly sets him apart is how perfectly he uses his physical attributes as an opposite. He has more freedom in this role compared to his days as a middle blocker, but the principle remains the same. He's more likely to be stopped by his setter than by the opposing defense. Muserskiy knows he doesn't need to jump as hard as possible every time to beat the block. Efficiency, not flair, is his priority. Despite being one of the tallest players in the world, even among those over 210 centimeters, few can match his versatility and composure. His move to the Japanese league has only sharpened his skills, particularly in attacking against tight defenses. Over the past couple of years, I've noticed that Muserskiy can create opportunities out of seemingly nothing. In situations where most hitters would look for a safer option, Dmitriy confidently secures the point for his team. His massive height plays a big role here, allowing him to adjust calmly to the ball and deliver aggressive attacks. Even Nimir, as incredible as he is, doesn't always take the kinds of risks Muserskiy does. While the Dutch opposite pulls off unbelievable plays, Dmitriy's calm confidence and efficiency remain unmatched. Muserskiy's blocking is like a super weapon in the hands of Sunbirds. With his excellent game-reading ability and unmatched reach, even when blocking alone, the chances of bypassing him without a touch are incredibly slim. If the ball is set close to the net, you can confidently award the point to his team. Even fast sets struggle to bypass him. Though Muserskiy starts near his middle blocker, he prioritizes his hitter and only helps in the middle as a secondary focus. Only lightning-fast sets can save the attacker. If Dmitriy reaches the collision point, he often can't fully read the attacker's intentions and defaults to blocking zone 6. When given time to think, he becomes a nightmare for opponents. In the center, he usually only needs to stretch his arms to become an excellent helper for his middle blocker. Despite all this, the Russian moves very efficiently along the net. If the situation allows, he happily helps set up a triple block. Despite his impressive size, Muserskiy manages to be extremely mobile and versatile in defense. And here he has managed to turn what could be considered a disadvantage into an advantage. The opposite doesn't try to guess the ball's landing spot, but simply, like a goalkeeper, reduces the distance and covers as much area as possible. Even if the ball moves away from Dmitriy, he can stretch out an arm and keep it in play. Oh, how great it would be to see Dmitriy in some international tournament. I'm sure he could still surprise any opponent in the world. Now, let's add a bit of the usual analysis for this format. It's time to talk about Dmitriy Muserskiy's serve. And, of course, we'll start with the ritual accompanying his introduction of the ball into play. On his way to the serving area, the opposite manages to hit the ball twice. Then he presses it to his chest, taps it on the floor 3 times with his right hand, grabs it with a slight spin using both hands, and finally shifts it to his left hand. After a brief breathing exercise, the ball ends up in his right hand for the toss. Since Muserskiy began adding spin to the ball during the toss, this fascinating spectacle of chasing the ball in the air has emerged. Most often, the ball flies in various directions, and all of Dmitriy's efforts go into positioning himself under it properly. Muserskiy has 3 zones from which he can serve. On one side of the court, he can serve near Zone 1, while on the opposite side, he serves from Zone 5. If his run-up starts from the right edge of the court, the ball is more likely to fly to Zone 6 or 1. The farther he tosses the ball from himself, the higher the likelihood it will land in the corner of Zone 1. If the serve comes from the center, the ball will most likely end up in Zone 6 or at its borders with Zones 1 and 5. If Dmitriy serves from Zone 5, it all depends on the toss quality. If the ball is above or slightly to the left of him, it will most often land in Zone 5. If the ball drifts far to the left, Dmitriy will have to adjust his body sideways, increasing the chance that the ball will follow a line trajectory. Opponent receivers understand this well, so Dmitriy most often scores aces in situations where the ball doesn't follow the trajectory he initially intended. This episode about the legendary Russian volleyball player who continues to demonstrate top-level volleyball turned out to be rather unusual. I'm sure you enjoyed it, so I'm definitely expecting likes and subscriptions from you. About 80% of views come from unsubscribed viewers. If you like my work, I'll be waiting for you to join our volleyball family. Without you, I can't make it to 100,000 subscribers. Don't forget to write in the comments who you'd like to see in the next episodes of this series. As always, I'll focus on your preferences. And as usual, it was Nick with you. Love what you do and you're bound to succeed. See you soon. Bye.